Hello, everybody, and welcome to Project HR, a podcast dedicated to building better workplaces. Project HR is brought to you by Projections, an IRI company. IRI helps organizations navigate workplace challenges, improve employee engagement and productivity, manage labor relations, and implement effective communication strategies to achieve their goals. I am Jennifer Oraquah, Director of Business Development for IRI, and your host for today's episode of Project HR. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to stop for a moment and take a deep breath. I'd like for all of us to realize that we're continuing to be affected by the pandemic in a huge variety of ways, forcing us to dig deep and find our own resiliency. It's important to acknowledge that our organizations cannot pivot and persevere without the personal resilience of our people. Helping people develop that personal resilience requires awareness, intention, and commitment to the ongoing work. That's why my guest today is none other than Vivian Blade. Vivian is a recognized leadership expert and thought leader. Her latest book, Resilience Ready, The Leader's Guide to Thriving Through Unrelenting Crises, is a #1 Amazon bestseller. I'm thrilled to be talking with Vivian about how we can learn to overcome the overwhelm, recover more quickly, and learn the secrets of resilience. Vivian, thanks so much for being here with me today on Project HR.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. It is a pleasure to be with you. I'm excited about our talk today.
So, Vivian, the release of your book in April of last year had uncanny timing, hitting just at the pinnacle of the pre vaccine COVID crisis. Can you tell me a little bit about the inspiration that led you to write Resilience Ready?
Yes, and of course, given everything that was going on with COVID, back in 2020, I actually had already started writing a book about how we navigate through different crossroads that we face. And then as the pandemic hit, I thought, what can I do to help leaders through this time? And I began to develop resources and put them online and videos that to help them build resilient skill and help them to navigate through this crossroads that we were in. And so I really shifted the focus of my book then to this resilience ready topic and took a lot of the resources from my research, did more research that really helped to give leaders strategies that would be helpful for themselves individually, and
Hmm.
then to take back to their teams and their organizations to help build resilience with other people and within their companies.
And that makes perfect sense because you can't have one without the other. What kind of
Right.
feedback have you received on the book over the last year?
It has been phenomenal. It has been a resource that through the workshops that I'm doing, through the coaching that I'm doing, through some of the retreats that I'm doing, that are really helping individuals to take a breath, reset, refresh, reframe,
Mm-hmm.
and to move forward. And in fact, if you don't mind, I'll share this quote with you that I just got in an email this week
Sure. Yeah.
from a workshop that I did back last month with an organization, and they said, "Thank you again for a great session at our staff meeting. I know I learned a lot, and it was." Has been a good opportunity to reflect on all the change I have been through personally and organizationally, where we are and where we're going. Your workshop and book have been great tools that I'm already using to build my personal resilience, and I look forward to continuing this journey with our team.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. So very, very similar.
Hmm. So tell me, obviously, you're getting it right. What do most of us get wrong when it comes to leading during a crisis?
Our natural tendency, Jennifer, is to focus on the to do list.
Mm.
What do we need to do to get on that checklist, mark some things off, and feel like we're really making progress at solving the problem? And what Resilience Ready is all about, and what we often get wrong in leadership, is the fact that we don't focus on the human capital elements of
Mm.
a crisis and that resilience piece and how we need to support and come alongside each other, build each other up, and help each other and sort of come through this whole thing as a community
Mm.
and as a group. And we get into this whole fight or flight mode
Mhm.
because, in the crisis speaks directly to our amygdala, coming into
Mhm.
our brain, that part that feels like that it has to respond, quickly before we even have a chance to process and really think about what we're going through and what we need to do. So, we get into that mode then of the checklist. And, the other thing I would say with organizations, they don't really develop their leaders to be able to lead in this way
Hmm.
and to work through crises this way. And so in my research, I found that that was really one of the big gaps as well.
Well, for sure. And I certainly relate to the to do list. My mode of operation is always take action. So that makes perfect sense. And resilience is a word that a lot of people throw around as a goal, but it's one of those things I'm not sure we all agree on what that means. How do you define resilience?
Yeah, and I want to go back to the comment you made right before you got into this next question, real quickly, if I may,
Sure.
Jennifer,
Absolutely.
to say that to everyone, there's nothing wrong with the checklist either. We do need the checklist. we
Sure.
we absolutely need the checklist because
Yep.
we do have to get things done, and so I want to make sure that people realize that in addition to that, we also need to think about the human capital
Hmm.
piece of it, and so when we think about this concept of resilience in this term, so many times people think about resilience as just having to press forward and press ahead and go through the brick wall and go over the mountain and just persevere through. And this whole concept of bouncing back as we do that, when we go through something that we bounce back. But really, when we go through a crisis, when we go through a challenge, even the things that we go through in our everyday lives that are surprises that come up for us, we are in a different place.
Hmm.
Each of those are different experiences
Hmm.
that we go through. No two crises are alike. But what a crisis helps us to do and what we're really looking for with resilience is our ability to adapt,
Hmm.
to be agile. And the American Psychological Association, their actual definition of resilience is around this whole concept of adapting.
Hmm.
When we are faced with challenge and surprises and it's really that skill that we develop and how we can adapt to
Hmm.
those situations that we're in. And I like to think about the rubber band analogy,
Hmm.
thinking about that whole bouncing back thing. And I created these wristbands that I give out during the workshops that I do because I want people to be able to have that reminder that it's not just about bouncing back, but we want to think about the full utility of a rubber band or a rubber wristband,
Hmm.
if you will, that there's a lot of utility that it has. And as it's used, as it goes through those challenges, it's stretched time and time again. It has some growing pains,
Hmm.
and maybe loses a little bit of that bounce back ability, but it can adapt to what the task that we have at hand for that rubber band. So, I want people to think about that, the full utility of what we have to offer, what we can do when we're going through crises,
Hmm.
and we're learning to adapt to what we're going through.
And I want to go back to something that you mentioned a minute ago, how our ability to cope or react to, a second crisis or a third once we're already in the midst of something, I'm sure that that's affected by our own resilience. So is resilience a character trait? Is this something that can be learned?
A lot of our resilience comes from what we go through and how we are going through different experiences through our lives. People have had pretty easy lives where things have really gone pretty well for them. And there have been people who have been in some really tough situations. And as they end up in adulthood, as they get to adulthood, a lot of those individuals who maybe have gone through a lot of those tough times, and depending on how they've been able to come through those, the support systems that they've come through it, the resources that they've had available to them as they've gone through those tough challenges, sometimes dictates the level of resilience that an individual will have.
Hmm.
But we all go through challenges. We've all had something that we can go back and point to that have been, crises or those surprises in our lives, and we learn from them.
Hmm.
So, therefore, resilience is a skill that we develop along the way. It is a muscle memory
Mm.
that we build as we go through a crisis. And we remember how we got through the ones before, what helped us, what didn't
Hmm.
serve us,
Hmm.
and what can help us with the one that we're going through today.
I love that. And this is all really great information. I have to take a sponsorship break right now, but when we come back, I want to talk with you about your resilience ready leadership framework and how companies can help their teams overcome the overwhelm, recover quickly, and get those faster results. Back in a moment.
Creating and maintaining a solid digital employee communication strategy can seem overwhelming. But missing out on the advantages of today's tools can mean missing the mark in developing and maintaining positive employee relations. We've identified 7 digital communication mistakes our clients make most often to give you a huge leap forward in your digital communication strategy. From clearly defining the intent of your communication to ensuring consistency, these practical tips are easy to implement. By avoiding mistakes like solving the wrong problem at the wrong time or not taking advantage of a variety of delivery mechanisms, you'll create a solid digital communication strategy that engages employees. Don't waste another minute on an ineffective strategy. Download your free copy of the 7 digital employee communication mistakes today at projectionsinc.com/employee-digital-communication.
I'm back now with author and educator Vivian Blade to talk about how we and our companies can be more resilience ready. So, before we talk about what your book, Resilience Ready: The Leader's Guide to Thriving Through Unrelenting Crises, can teach us, let's address what it cannot. This book is not a book that's going to help us outline a disaster plan, right?
Yeah, that's right. It goes back to what I was talking about earlier, Jennifer, where a lot of our focus a lot of times is on that disaster plan, on that checklist, on the things that we need to do, and not on the people. One of the leaders that I interviewed for the book talked about when she worked for UPS, and she worked with that company when there was a crash or something that happened. And she was working at that time and part of the ground crew that once that happened, they knew exactly what to do. They got the book out. It told them exactly what steps to follow, what they needed to do, run through the checklist. And one of the things that she remembers that really helped her as she was leading her team through that whole all those activities, that they had to get through was checking in with people to making sure that they were okay,
Hmm.
to seeing what the trauma was that they were dealing with and what they needed at that particular point in time. So it's not the checklist, but it's the human capital piece.
For sure. So, on that note, let's talk a little bit about the role servant leadership plays in this process.
Yeah, the whole foundation of Resilience Ready is based on servant leadership principles. I wrote it that way because if we are going to really focus on the human capital piece, then we really have to have others at heart. We have to have a deep, genuine concern and compassion and empathy for what other people are going through.
Mhm.
That human connection is really what servant leadership is about. And so the focus is on not only then how we develop ourselves in resilience, but how we extend that, how we develop and how we grow others in the process as we're leading. That's the foundation of servant leadership. So
Mhm.
it extends itself so well here because when we're going through crisis, when we're going through change, and we're going through so much change in our organizations today, then we can bring each other along in the process.
Mhm.
Recognizing that there is a lot that people are going through. You're
Mhm.
not in it alone. You can go through it together.
So, and your teachings start by inspiring personal resilience within us as leaders. Can you tell me a little bit about that process? And I'm kind of alluding here to your 5 resilience ready principles, and those ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't have team or organizational resilience really, Jennifer, unless you have personal resilience. It's like being a leader, and it goes back to that whole thing that we think about, the saying that we've all heard, "Do as I say, not as I do." When you're trying to parent sometimes,
Mhm.
and we have all sort of heard that little thing, but
Mhm.
tongue in cheek kind of
Mhm.
thing. But
Mhm.
we also see that come up a lot when we talk about leaders and leaders in the workplace, and whether we role model or not. And it comes through if we are dealing with change and we're not on board, or we're nervous about it, or fear creeps in. In
Mhm.
the book, I talk about the three types of fear that we have. We have this fear of uncertainty, fear of failure. Most certainly, it's fear of change and what things are going to be in the future. So, getting through those fears, people can see it if we have them.
Mhm.
So we want to be able to role model resilience, have some of that resilience so that we can actually inspire and empower others in the process. So that really is our starting point.
Mhm. For sure. So once I find my own personal resilience as a leader, that's when I can really help inspire it within my teams, right? How do I go about doing that?
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the resilience ready principles and then how that leads into building team resilience. The resilience ready principles are built on a framework of five key principles, and they are your perspective, purpose, perseverance, partnership, and praise. And I'll just give you a brief summary of each of those. Our perspective, one of the things that I encourage people to do is to make sure that they adopt an optimistic outlook,
Mm.
because as we talked about earlier, we're when we're faced with a crisis, change, some kind of surprise, and that information comes into the amygdala in our brain, our automatic response is negativity, pushback. I didn't ask for this. How
Mhm.
many of us can think
Mhm.
about when we were back at the beginning of the pandemic? And I remember, when things first started, my our daughter was in Chicago, and she was going to come back to where we live to ride out the pandemic with us. And I remember the morning we were going to go pick her up, and it was early on. I was so afraid. I remember my knees knocking together. It was with
Mm.
all of the information,
Mhm.
that we were scared to death with everything that was in the news.
Mhm.
And so I just had to collect myself and really think about, one, the opportunity that we had to be able to be together through this
Mhm.
process, and lean on my faith a lot, and prayer a lot through that time. But really, that optimistic outlook helps us to know that there is hope. There's a different opportunity for us ahead. Even as I got laid off 12 years ago, and thinking about what I was going to do next, not being mired in what I call one of these internal crisis response stages of just surviving and getting through, or feeling like a victim, but being able to move beyond that and figure out how you're going to move ahead. So that's perspective.
Mhm.
Our purpose is about really the meaningfulness that we have. Our mother taught us that we all are here for a purpose, that there's something that you can do, something that you can give. And when we go through a challenge and a crisis, sometimes our purpose as individuals, as organizations, shifts a little because our customers may need us a little bit different. The environment that we're in changes. But how can we make a difference is the action item and the question that I ask people to ask themselves when we think about purpose. When we think about perseverance, the third resilience ready principle, that is about how we not just push through, but make sure that we set the conditions that help us to move through and get through these challenging times. And one of the action items I encourage people to do there is to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves first. It's another lessons
Mhm.
learned
Mhm.
from our mom. She taught us that you have to take care of yourself first before you can take care of others. And So, and especially as women, many times we give so much of ourselves and are taking care of our families that we leave ourselves last. And so we want to make sure that we're setting the stage so that we can persevere.
Mhm.
And then partnership is about how we engage others, both for ourselves when we're building personal resilience. Sometimes we want to stay insulated. We're afraid to reach out, but there are people who care about us in our network who want to help us and come alongside us.
Mhm.
And then as leaders, we want to make sure that we are proactively reaching out to our teams to help them through the challenging times and understand what they need.
Mhm.
The last resilience ready principle is praise. And a couple of things we want to do there. One is just give ourselves some grace because everything is not going to be perfect. And one of the other leaders that I interviewed for Resilience Ready, in her comments, she said that she reminds her team that resilience and this whole concept of adapting gives us permission to go through it messy. And we're not looking for perfection. Perfection is not the goal, but coming out on the other side in a better place and knowing that we can come out on the other side in a better place is the goal. So we want to give ourselves some grace, give others some grace, and recognize and appreciate people for both the effort that they're putting in to get through and to make it day to day, and even those small accomplishments, the small milestones that we're able to accomplish. So, wanted to set the stage with those five resilience ready principles and what
Mhm.
they are. And then as leaders, we can build our personal resilience, model that, support others, engage our teams in the intentional process, provide some skill development with training and coaching and working together to really apply these action items
Mhm.
and these resilience ready principles.
Well, and the partnership principle really kind of resonates with me, particularly as I wonder how once we've got these concepts, in place, how do we take this out to the organization as a whole? How do we make the company resilient as well?
Yeah, we really have to think about these resilience ready principles as our value system.
Mm.
Really part of our culture and who we are. So as leaders, we have to really rethink and as human resource professionals, we
Mhm.
really have to help our business partners really rethink our culture. Take a good hard look at where we are.
Mhm.
One of the assessments that I offer is there are actually a couple that really relate well here. One is the Resilience Ready self assessment, which gives us an idea of where an organization is and individuals are from responding to a crisis like a victim
Mhm.
to being at the point where you are really thriving, which is really our goal. How do we go along the journey and get to a point where we can thrive? And when we have new surprises come up, how can we get to a point where we can adapt so that we can thrive again, and have that muscle memory, know
Mhm.
how to do that again.
Mhm.
So really, really baking it into our culture, doing some training, again, and reflecting on where we are,
Mhm.
understanding where stress is in the organization. A stress assessment is another thing that I offer, and how that is affecting you,
Mhm.
where that's holding you back.
Mhm.
So these resources and tools and help us to be able to apply a different strategy
Mhm.
and have a different opportunity for our future so that we can be equipped to thrive.
Yeah, these are all great tools. Vivian, I'm going to take some time out for another quick break, and we'll be right back after this. You're listening to the Project HR podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Orqua, and my guest today is Vivian Blade, author of Resilience Ready, The Leader's Guide to Thriving Through Unrelenting Crises. We are back. And Vivian, I want to talk a little bit about the great resignation. How can these resilience principles help our leaders solve issues that every company seems to be dealing with these days?
Yeah, we are all so much in this time of trying to figure out how to keep people, how to get people. And that goes back to as we build resilience ready organizations where we're changing the culture to be an environment where what I encourage leaders to think about and HR professionals to think about is how can we build a culture where people say, this is a place where I want to work and I feel valued.
Mm.
And we are all stressed. So many people tell me we are just worn out. Everybody
Mhm.
is just worn out. They're going 100 miles an hour. Things are changing. What things we change today change tomorrow. There's more with the pandemic that continues to evolve when we feel like we're finished with it, and people are just worn out.
Mm.
So how are you responding and reacting to this constant change environment that we're in? How are we being attentive to individuals, really building that partnership, building purposeful, meaningful work and engaging everyone around that, having a positive perspective, this optimistic outlook that we can come through it and that we do come through it together. That when we think about perseverance, we think about work-life balance, we think about really what is important for the individuals in our organization and how can we meet them where they are,
Mhm.
uh, help them to um, have a work style, uh, create their workplace environment in a way that serves them and that serves the organization
Mhm.
well. So, where can we meet on that?
Mhm.
And then are we just churning things out on that task list? You know, um, Having people work crazy hours
Mm.
and not rewarding them for it or not even be mindful of that, and even just the little thank yous sometimes that we can say that
Mhm.
help encourage and inspire others.
Sure.
Yeah, so those are ways that as we think about the great resignation, what are we asking people to do? What environment are they in? What is their experience like
Mhm.
when they are here, when they are at work or when they're officially off the clock?
Mhm.
And how can we build that partnership so that this is a place where people want to work and they
Mm.
feel valued?
Yeah, for sure. And we're all still kind of in the middle of this particular crisis. So I'm wondering if it's possible to build that resilience within ourselves and our teams and our organizations while we're actually in the midst of the crisis itself.
It's all a learning process. And part of one of the first things that you have to do when I talk about perspective is self-awareness. So that awareness of where you are, how you are going through a crisis, what stage of internal crisis response you're in, so that you can learn and you can adapt as you are going through. So, we are in the middle of 2 years, plus now, getting
Mhm.
through the pandemic, getting through this crisis, and learning how to fly the plane
Mhm.
as we're going through it. And that's the reality that we're in
Mhm.
these days.
Yeah. And I love that your book contains some really useful tools, including that self-assessment that you talked about and a workbook. Why was it important to have these tools accompany this knowledge in the book?
Building your resilience is a journey. It is a process, and it's not an on and off switch
Mhm.
at all. And my goal was to help individuals as leaders, as HR professionals, as whatever your role is, as mom, as dad, at home, to have resources and tools that help you to actually build your resilience, work on developing that skill set, and then also practical tools that you could use that you could just take and here work with your team to help those individuals build their resilience and build collective resilience as well. So it's a journey, it's a process. We need resources, we need support, we need tools. And I wanted to make those readily available for people to be able to have them right there
Yeah.
to work with.
Which is great. And we mentioned in the beginning that we've all had to find the resilience to adjust and adapt and make things work in the face of so many challenges. Looking for a silver lining here, has this crisis made us more resilient, maybe better prepared for the next crisis that comes down the road?
We absolutely can be better prepared. The scale of this particular crisis that we have been through has been one that has been unimaginable
Mm.
for us, and the length of time that we've gone through it. And it has not been easy. It's been very difficult for all of us. But given that, if we take the time to reflect on where we've been and what we've learned, the skills we've developed, what we can continue to do as we move forward, what we might do differently as we move forward through the next crisis, and make sure that we are doing the things that we can to build skill so that we are equipped,
Mhm.
really adequately equipped for more crises as they come up, and they are sure to come, then we certainly are preparing ourselves
Mhm.
as we are going through this crisis. We're learning. We're absolutely learning.
For sure. Vivian, if I want to learn more about you, the work you do, your book, where can I go?
I would encourage people to visit a couple of places. I have shared a number of resources. There's a version of the Resilience Ready self assessment, as well as other resources that you can access at resilienceready.today. So that's a website, resilienceready.today. Feel free to visit my website, vivianblade.com. And then the Resilience Ready book and workbook are both available on Amazon.
Very nice. And I want to let everyone know that those links, as well as Vivian's 5 Resilience Ready principles, will be included in this episode's companion guide. So be sure to unlock that today at projectionsinc.com/podcast. Right now, Vivian, it is time for our lightning round questions. And these are questions I like to ask of every guest of the podcast. Are you ready?
I am ready.
All right. So our first question is always a topic showdown. In this episode, we've been talking about resilience. So Vivian, in your opinion, which is the most resilient movie franchise, James Bond or Star Trek?
Man, you gave me some tough choices there, Jennifer. I'm telling you, that's hard to choose because both of those are resilient, and I think they're resilient in different ways. But with my choice, I think between the two would probably be Star Trek because of the breadth of the community of resilience. As you know, as we look at the whole Star Trek family, if you will.
For sure. All right. Next question. What's the best book you've read recently?
I think there are probably a couple of books that I would recommend. One is Own Your Career, Own Your Life, which is by Andy Storch. And another is that a colleague introduced to me, The High Five Habit by Mel Robbins.
Very nice. Next question. What is your favorite thing about the work that you do?
Oh, my very favorite thing is the transformation I have the opportunity to see in people. That is my absolute favorite.
And what is the best piece of advice that you've ever been given?
Probably the best piece of advice is, and this really goes along with the partnership principle, that the journey in our lives, it really is not about ourselves. It's about the difference that we have the opportunity to make in this world and really in the lives of others. I mentioned earlier, as our mom taught us, that everybody has a purpose. We all have a purpose. It goes with that purpose principle as well. And so I'd say that's the greatest advice. It's not necessarily about me or about you, but it's what I can do to help others in the world.
I like that. All right, last question. Who or what inspires you?
I get a lot of inspiration from the colleagues I get to work with, the HR community I get to work with, the talent development community I get to work with, the leaders and professionals that I have an opportunity to serve. That really inspires me. And then I'd say my faith in God and my family are other things. Those are core values for me, and those are things that inspire me.
Very nice. Thanks so much for joining me today on this week's episode of Project HR, Vivian.
Thanks so much for having me, Jennifer. I certainly have enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, and thanks to our listeners. And once again, this is your reminder to grab that companion guide for this episode at projectionsinc.com/podcast. If you'd like to be on Project HR, or if you know someone who would, feel free to email us at projecthr@projectionsinc.com. And last, but certainly not least, to make sure you never miss an episode of Project HR, we hope you'll subscribe to the podcast. Drop us a line, leave us a review, or give us a handful of stars wherever you get your content. That's it from me for now. Let's make it a great day at work.